The sun cleared the Galilee hills, flooding the valley floor with sharp, liquid gold. Below, the rhythm of the earth was constant. Men hauled dripping nets from the lake, and others leaned into the heavy wooden handles of plows, turning the dark soil. But on a remote, quiet slope, the pace changed. Jesus stood before the 12, his gaze fixed on the winding, dust-choked path that stretched toward the horizon. He raised a hand, and the low hum of the morning stilled. Proclaim this message: the kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, and give as freely as you have received. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of dry grass and approaching heat. The disciples stood silent, their eyes tracking the line of his gesture. This was not a suggestion, it was a mandate. The valley below went about its work, unaware of the shift, but here, the air felt heavy with the weight of the journey ahead. Every man stood motionless, processing the command to leave the familiar for the unknown. The mission had begun. Thomas stepped forward, his feet shuffling in the loose dirt. He looked at his hands, then back at the path. Lord, what of our supplies? How are we to sustain the walk? The wind died down, leaving the slope in a sudden, expectant quiet. Jesus did not look back, his finger tracing the line of the dusty road. Take no gold, no silver, no extra tunic, and no spare sandals. The worker earns his bread. The disciples exchanged glances. The weight of their satchels suddenly felt immense, a tangible anchor to the world they were being asked to leave behind. Peter reached for the leather straps looped over his shoulders. With a sharp tug, he loosened the knots. He let the bag slide down his arm and drop into the tall grass. The dull thud of the impact echoed against the hillside. One by one, the others followed. Satchels hit the earth, spilling the heavy contents of their former lives. They stood straighter now, their hands empty and palms open. They turned toward the horizon, stripped of their security, yet moving with a new, singular purpose. The path ahead was empty, but they walked forward without looking back. By midday, the heat had turned the road to powder. The disciples reached an olive-shaded village, the low branches offering a brief reprieve from the sun. Peter walked to the nearest doorway, raised a calloused hand, and spoke, "Peace be to this house." The hosts invited them in, offering crusts of coarse bread and jars of cool water. In the dim corner of the room, an elderly man lay on a mat, his limbs rigid and unresponsive. John walked over, knelt on the packed earth, and placed a firm hand on the man's shoulder. He closed his eyes and spoke a single, quiet prayer. The man's fingers twitched against the floor. He blinked, gripped the rough edge of the table, and shoved himself upright. He stood. His legs held his weight. The sound of his gasping breath filled the room. Outside, the news traveled like fire through dry brush. Within minutes, the streets were packed with people pressing toward the doorway. They brought the sick, the lame, and the weary, shouting names and reaching for the disciples. By evening, the village square was a roar of voices, with the disciples moving through the crowd, praying over the lines of people and refusing every coin pressed into their palms. The next town was different. The sun hung low and heavy as the disciples stepped into the town square. The usual bustle of trade ceased the moment they appeared. Peter opened his mouth to offer the customary greeting, but the words died in his throat. A man near the central well kicked a stone. It skidded across the hard-packed earth and struck the toe of Thomas's sandal. Then another followed. A group of men stood by the town wall, their jaws tight. One stepped forward, looked directly at Peter, and spat on the ground at his feet. The air in the square grew thick and stagnant. No one offered bread. No one offered water. The disciples stopped walking, their heels digging into the dust. Thomas felt the weight of the silence, his shoulders sagging under the intensity of the glares. He looked toward the village exit, his breath hitching. Peter reached out, his hand firm on Thomas's shoulder, anchoring him. They did not move forward, yet they did not turn to run. They stood in the center of the hostile circle, watching the men who had barred their way. The path ahead was blocked, and the welcome they had known was gone, replaced by the cold resistance of a town that wanted nothing of their message. The silence in the square stretched, heavy with the sound of shallow, jagged breathing from the gathered men. Thomas shifted his weight, his eyes darting from the stones scattered at their feet to the tight, angry faces blocking the path. He waited for a command to speak or to defend, but Peter simply looked at the village boundary. He did not raise his voice. He did not reach for a weapon. Instead, Peter stepped to the edge of the hard-packed earth. He lifted his right foot, gripped the heel of his sandal, and shook it firmly. A fine cloud of gray dirt drifted to the ground. John and Thomas followed suit, one by one. They tapped their soles against the dry grass, clearing every grain of the town's earth from their feet. They performed the task slowly, with deliberate, rhythmic motions that caught the eyes of the men watching them. No one spoke. The finality of the action hung in the air, sharper than any shout or argument. With the dust left behind, the disciples turned their backs to the square. They walked toward the horizon, their strides steady and unbroken. They did not glance back at the jeering crowd. They simply kept moving, their path redirected, their mission untouched by the rejection of the town. As twilight deepened, the disciples gathered beneath the heavy, sprawling branches of an ancient oak tree. The air cooled rapidly, carrying the scent of dry grass and approaching night. Andrew sat on a protruding root, holding his calloused, empty hands up to the fading light. He looked at the palms, then at his companions. We left with nothing, yet we have lacked for nothing. Peter stood a few paces away, his gaze fixed upward as the first stars pricked the indigo sky. He watched them emerge, one by one, steady and persistent. Some doors were locked, others were thrown open. Peter said, his voice low against the rustle of leaves. But the message was delivered in both. They sat in the silence of the cooling evening, the weight of the day falling away. The mission remained etched in their movements, a simple directive to carry peace into every home they encountered. They did not need gold or extra sandals to move forward. They only needed the resolve to serve and the trust that the path provided was enough. The stars burned brighter as the disciples rested, their journey continuing with every step they would take tomorrow, carrying the same quiet conviction into a world that would always need the message.